This is Kenny Tan. Welcome to Real Estate License in 14 Weeks. This is episode 16 of Starting from Zero. In this episode, I'll be covering Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. Because Chapter 4 is hardly tested in the DIE exam, I'm only going to be spending a few minutes and start delving into Chapter 5. If you like my video, feel free to give me a thumbs up and subscribe and hit the bell, and also share my video with your friends. We're going to be talking about Chapter 4. Some of the more important questions that will come out in the DIE exam will come from the land description. There are basically three types of land description. Number one is called the meets and bounds. Meets stand for distances and bounds stands for points. So as you can see, the system of meets and bounds consists of distances and points. So imagine if you have a rectangular lot, it will consist of 1, 2, 3, 4 points and 4 distances. So meets and bounds are just a system of points and distances. These points and distances are determined by the surveyor. What is a monument? Monuments are just landmarks. A landmark can be artificial or natural. Artificial landmarks are typically like canal, highways, stakes. Natural landmarks are usually like mountains, rivers. What is a benchmark? A benchmark is just a mark that's used by the surveyor as an elevation point. That's what a benchmark is. The next system is what we call the U.S. Government Survey and Section System. It consists of baselines and meridians, and there are 3 important base and meridian systems. You have the Mount Diablo, Humboldt, and San Bernardino. Baselines are just lines that runs east and west, and meridians runs north and south. The Township System consists of sections. Sections are identified by section number. One township has 36 sections. Section number 1 is located on the northeast corner, and then you go west for 6. From 1 to number 6 is you're going from the right hand side to the left hand side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you go down. You go from 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then you go down. So basically, you're going crisscrossing from east to west, and then from west to east. So altogether, there are 36 sections. So section 1 is on the top northeast corner, and then section 36 is on the southeast corner. Each section in a township consists of 640 acres, and 1 acre is equal to 43,560 square feet. The third system is what we call the recorded tract map lot or block system. What is a setback? A setback is the distance between the street and the front of the building to comply with the local ordinance. What is a side setback? A side yard setback is nothing more than the distance between the side of the building and the property line to comply with the local ordinance. What is a front footage? The front footage is the width of the lot fronting on designated street. As you can see, there's very little bit of material to cover in Chapter 4. I don't want to waste too much of your time teaching you stuff that is not going to appear on the exam. So that's why I'm only covering a few minutes on what's going to be tested in Chapter 4. Now let's go ahead and talk about Chapter 5. Now, Chapter 5 is Financing 1. So we'll go over some basic concept in Chapter 5. What is a promissory note? A promissory note is nothing more than an evidence of a debt. Usually, a promissory note is signed together with the trust deed. If you borrow money from the bank will ask you to sign a promissory note. They also call it note. Now, there are different kinds of notes. There are certain notes that only require to pay interest only. Essentially, for example, if you get a note, if you sign a note, you borrow money for 6 months, and you're only paying interest every month, that is called a straight note. A straight note is basically an interest-only note with a balloon payment at the end of it. What that means, for example, if you borrow $100,000 for 6 months at a 10% interest, well, let's call it 12% interest. So it's 1% per month, right? So each month you're paying about 100,000. You're paying about close to $1,000 a month in interest. So you're basically paying $1,000 in interest for the next 6 months, and then at the end of it, you pay a balloon payment, which is nothing more than the remaining balance on the principal. Since it's only interest, we call it the straight note. The next type of note is called the including interest note. What is an including interest promissory note? An including interest promissory note is very common among residential loan. For example, if you buy a house, you get a loan from the bank. Say if you get a 30-year fixed rate loan, so basically you will be paying 360 months of mortgage payment. By the end of it, well, actually it's including interest. So basically, in the beginning part of the payment, the majority of the money that you pay to the bank consists mostly of the interest. Only a small percentage of that is the principal. But as you pay toward the end of the term, which is 360 months, most of the installment that you make to the bank will consist of principal. So by the end of it, pretty much the entire monthly payment will be the principal. So you sort of get the feeling that you're getting richer and richer toward the end. So for example, you might get a 30-year fixed rate loan, and the monthly payment, let's say, is $1,250. Now, this $1,250 installment stays constant for the next 360 months. And the $1,250 would consist of principal as well as the interest, and it's the same amount. That's why we call it the including interest loan. The next type of note is called the adjustable note. With the adjustable note, the interest can fluctuate. It can go up or it can go down. So how the interest is going to be adjusted will depend on what type of loan program you have. For example, when you get a residential loan that is an adjustable rate loan, that adjustable rate interest will fluctuate in accordance with the change in the mortgage rate. That's why we call it an adjustable rate note. Now let's talk about amortization. There are basically two types of amortization. The first type is called fully amortized, and then the second type is called partially amortized. The typical residential mortgage is fully amortized. Fully amortized means that by the end of the term, if you get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, the end of the term, that is 360 months later, your principal balance is zero because it is fully amortized. Now, there are certain types of commercial loans that are not fully amortized. For example, you may have a 5-year loan which is amortized for 30 years. What happened is that at the end, the term of the loan is only 5 years, but as far as monthly payment goes, it is divided over 30 years. So each month, you're making a payment to the bank. By the end of the 5th year, because it is a 5-year term, 5 times 12 is 60 months. So you make a payment of principal and interest over the next 60 months. By the end of it, it's not quite the full 30 years. Therefore, when the term is up, there is still a principal balance. So we call that a partially amortized note, okay? So that's the difference between fully amortized and partially amortized. Now let's talk about negotiable instrument. A negotiable instrument is nothing more than an agreement to pay money. A personal check is a negotiable instrument because a personal check is an agreement for somebody. When you write a personal check, you're essentially making an agreement to the person to whom you're giving the check that you will pay the money. So all this person has to do is deposit the check into an account. So a negotiable instrument is freely transferable. Now let's talk about endorsement. What is an endorsement? Endorsement is nothing more than a transfer of negotiable instrument. Usually when we get a check from somebody who owes us money, we take this check, go to the teller at the bank, and then on the back of the check, we will endorse the check. Because if we want the bank to pay us, we have to have the check deposited into our account. And in order to have it deposited and receive money into our account, we have to endorse on the back. And usually we do what we call a blank endorsement. What is a blank endorsement? Basically, you will just sign your name on the back of the check and then hand it to the teller. So that's called a blank endorsement. The next kind of endorsement is called a special endorsement. I'll give you an example of a special endorsement. Let's say I owe John $5,000 and John owes Justin $5,000. So when I write a check to John for $5,000, instead of depositing the check into his own account, into John's own account, John write on the back of the check, pay to the order of Justin, because John wants to use that check and to pay off the debt that he owed Justin. So that's called special endorsement. So John will basically write on the back of the check, pay to the order of whoever to whom he owes money. In real life, very few people do special endorsement, but that's just one way to endorse a check. The third way to endorse a check is called restricted endorsement. I'll give you an example. As a broker, I receive commission check from the escrow. After I receive commission check, typically I will have to turn around and write a check to my agents, because these amounts are very large amount, and I don't want to risk the money being stolen or perhaps being deposited into someone else's account that I wasn't aware of. So what I typically do is, on the back of the check, I would endorse as for deposit only. What that means is, whoever, my agent that got this check, cannot cash the check. That check would have to be deposited into the agent's account as opposed to getting cash from that check. That's called a restricted endorsement. Lastly, it's called a qualified endorsement. Qualified endorsement, I can give you this scenario. Say, for example, I owe John $5,000 and John owes Justin $5,000. So when I wrote a check to John, John turned around and endorsed the check and give it to Justin. But what John did is, John wrote on the back of the check without recourse. So when John gave this check that is without recourse to Justin, and if the check bounces, in other words, there is not enough money in my account, can Justin sue John? In this case, because it is a qualified endorsement, Justin cannot go after John if my check bounced. The only person that Justin can go after is me, because it is me whose check bounced. So if John did not write down without recourse, basically Justin can either sue John or myself. Justin has a choice of suing John or myself, but by writing down without recourse on the back of the check, John protected himself. That way, if my check bounced, he's not responsible for it, and Justin will be suing me to recover that $5,000. This is the end of episode 16. See you next time.